I wonder, will it let me put this into the thingy thing? It might say video's too long. Let's see. Ho ho! Let me do it. It wouldn't let somebody else do it, but it'll let me do it. How rude. Perfect music for the background. Chopin's Nocturnes, the most bipolar music you will ever fucking hear. The nocturnes, you can't tell if they're happy, sad, depressed, enjoy, anything. It is an entire array of emotions, and they make me so happy. I love the nocturnes so much. Mike, don't do that. Oh. And of course, before I start reading, I am going to go smoke a tobacco because I am an addict and it is a habit nobody should start because you will never end it. I've quit 3 times and picked it back up 3 times, so don't do it. I implore you, do not do it. No, not in your region. I'm sorry. It's okay. It is A-okay. It does have amazing shows on it. It really does. Like, it has everything that you would want to watch. Like, even Doctor Who and stuff. But, yeah. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I'm gonna push it, but... It's one of the streaming services, much like Netflix or Hulu or all that, but HBO Max has all the best shows. Like, literally all the best shows. It has a lot of them. Let me get the visualizer up behind me. Oh, I did the wrong source. Okay, hold up. Hold up. Hold up. Ah! Wrong thing. I had to do the game, not me. I turned myself into the visualizer. That is the opposite of what I wanted. Alright, and we are picking up from page 67. Let me pull up the thing again and post the book one more time, just because it is now a new stream, technically. And this is the book we're reading, picking up from page 67. I'm gonna go do my bad habit and do my nicotine, and then we will get started with this book. Not me. So I will be just back. In uno momento. Hold up. It's not doing it. Let me fix it. Project M, I want you to capture yourself, not... There we are. Now it fits. Now it works. Beautiful, beautiful. Alright, I will be back momentarily. I will, I promise. There we are, right? We gotta have the visualizer behind us. We don't want just a black backdrop. It just fits. Yet enjoy the works of Chopin. The nocturnes are the most bipolar, most beautiful thing you will ever hear. I like to believe that on my deathbed, I could die happy listening to the nocturnes. Like, that's just how beautiful they are. And I'm back. Let me get my phone on the charger so I can see the chat. Yeah, this is the entirety of the Nocturnes, so it's going to be about an hour and 50 minutes before we're back to the copyright-free music. Which is kind of perfect. Honestly, it's just perfect. Isn't it? Alright. Starting off from our last few sentences beforehand on the page before, which would be the very bottom of page 66, if you're following along. Coffee. Best way to avoid sleep. Really is. She awoke refreshed and feeling alert. So much that she sniffed the air coming from the grill over her head and surmised correctly that the doctor had offset the hypnotic she had been given with a stimulant. While she was asleep, someone had removed the dirty and torn street clothes she had been wearing and had left a simple, off-white dinner dress and sandals. The clothes fit her fairly well. Jill concluded that they must belong to the one the doctor had called Miriam. She bathed and painted her face, and combed her hair, and went down to the big living room feeling like a new woman. Dorcas was curled in a big chair. Doing needlepoint, she looked up. Oop, I'm a little off-kilter there. Nodded in a friendly manner as if Jill were always part of the household. Turned her attention back to her fancy work. Harshaw was standing and stirring gently a mixture in a tall and frosty pitcher. Drink, he said. Yes, thank you. He poured 2 large cocktail glasses to their brims, handed her one. What is it, she asked. My own recipe, a comet cocktail. 1/3 vodka, 1/3 muriatic acid, 1/3 battery water, 2 pinches of salt, and add a pickled beetle. Better have a highball, Dorcas advised. Jill noticed that the other girl had a tall glass at her elbow. Mind your own business, Harshaw advised her with rancor. The hydrochloric acid is good for the digestion. The beetle adds vitamins and protein. He raised his glass to Jill and said solemnly, Here's to the noble selves. There are damned few of us left. He almost emptied his glass, replenished it before he set it down. Jill took a cautious sip, then a much bigger one. Whatever the true ingredients, the drink seemed to be exactly what she needed. A warm feeling of well-being spread gently from her center of gravity toward her extremities. She drank about half of it. Let Harshaw add a dividend. Look in on our patient, he asked. No, sir. I didn't know where he was. I checked him a few minutes ago, sleeping like a baby. I think I'll rename him Lazarus. Do you think he would like to come down for dinner? Jill looked thoughtful. Doctor, I really don't know. Well, if he wakes, I'll know it. Then he can join us or have a tray, as he wishes. This is Freedom Hall, my dear. Everyone does absolutely as he pleases. Then if he does something I don't like, I just kick him the hell out. Which reminds me, I don't like to be called doctor, sir. Oh, I'm not offended, but when they began handing out doctorates for comparative folk dancing and advanced fly fishing, I became too stinkin' proud to use the title. I won't touch watered whiskey, and I take no pride in watered-down degrees. Call me Jubal. Like I said, Dr. Acid, you're gonna fucking love Jubal. Jubal, we can all strive to be half the person Jubal is. Oh, but the degree in medicine hasn't been watered down, as you call it. No, but it is time they called it something else, so as not to have it mixed up with playground supervisors. Never mind, little girl. Just what is your interest in this patient? I told you, Jubal. You told me what happened, you didn't tell me why. Jill, I saw the way you looked at him, and spoke to him. Do you think you are in love with him? Jill was startled. She glanced at Dorcas. The other girl appeared to not be hearing the conversation. Why, that's preposterous. I don't see anything preposterous about it. You're a girl, he's a boy. That's usually a nice setup. But no, Jubal, it's not that at all. I thought he was being held prisoner, and I thought that he might be in danger. I wanted to see him get his rights. My dear, I'm always suspicious of disinterested interest. You look as if you had a normal glandular balance, so it is my guess that it is either Ben or this poor boy from Mars, or both. You had better take your motives out in private and have a look at them. Then you will be better able to judge which way you are going. In the meantime, what do you want me to do? The unqualified scope of the question made it difficult for Jill to answer. What did she want? What did she expect? From the time she had crossed her Rubicon, she had thought of nothing but escape and getting to Harshaw's home. She had no plans. I don't know. I thought not. You had told me enough to let me know that you were AWOL from your hospital, so on the assumption that you might wish to protect your license, I took the liberty, while you were asleep, of having a message sent from Montreal to your chief of nursing. You asked for 2 weeks emergency leave because of a sudden illness in your family, okay? You can back it up with details later. Jill felt sudden and shaking relief. By temperament, she had buried all worry about her own welfare. Once she had made her decision, nevertheless, down inside her was a heavy lump caused by what she had done to an on the whole excellent professional standing. Oh, Jubal, thank you, she added. I'm not really delinquent in watch standing yet. Today was my day off. Good. Then you are covered like a tent. What do you want to do? I haven't had time to think. I suppose I should get in touch with my bank and get some money. She paused, trying to recall what her bank balance was. It was never large, and sometimes she forgot to. Jubal cut in on her thoughts. If you get in touch with your bank, you will have cops pouring out of your ears. Hadn't you better stay here until things level off? Jubal, I wouldn't want to impose on you. You already have imposed on me. Don't worry about it, child. There are always freeloaders around here, coming and going. One family stayed 17 months, but nobody imposes on me against my will, so relax about it. If you turn out to be useful as well as ornamental, you can stay forever. Now about our patient. You said you want him to get his rights. I suppose you expected my help in that? Well, Ben seemed to think that you would help. I like Ben, but he does not speak for me. I am not in the slightest interested in whether or not this lad gets his so-called rights. I don't go for the true prince nonsense. His claim to Mars is lawyer's hogwash. As a lawyer myself, I need not respect it. As for the wealth, that is supposed to be coming to him. The situation results from other people's inflamed passions and our odd tribal customs. He has earned none of it. In my opinion, he would be lucky if they bilked him out of it. But I would not bother to scan a newspaper to find out which outcome eventuated. If Ben expected me to fight for Smith's rights, you have come to the wrong house. Oh, Jill felt suddenly forlorn. I guess I had better make arrangements to move him. Oh no, not unless you wish, that is. But I thought you said... I said I was not interested in a web of legal fictions, but a patient and guest under my roof is another matter. He can stay if he likes. I just wanted to make it clear that I had no intention of meddling with politics to suit any romantic notions of you or Ben Caxton may have. My dear, I used to think I was serving humanity, and I pleasured in the thought. Then I discovered that humanity does not want to be served. On the contrary, it resents any attempt to serve it. So now I do what pleases Jubal Hershaw. He turned to Dorcas as if the subject were closed. Time for dinner, isn't it? Dorcas, is anyone doing anything about it? Miriam, she put down her needlepoint and stood up. I've never been able to figure out just how these girls divide up the work. Boss, how would you know, since you never do any? Dorcas patted him on the stomach. But you never miss any meals. One of my favorite lines from Jubal that's about to come up is and I think I've said this before, but Jubal at one point will say, nobody does anything that they don't want to do. But most people don't comprehend that. I, for one, do. It's not the exact words. He phrases it so much better, and I can't wait to get to that. Like, Jubal is perfection. I fucking love Jubal. Jubal is the reason I fell in love with this book. To be honest, that and the implications that the book has. It is just such a deep book. A gong sounded, and they went in to eat. If the redhead Miriam had cooked dinner, she had apparently done so with all modern shortcuts. She was already seated at the foot of the table, and looked cool and beautiful. In addition to the 3 secretaries, there was a young man slightly older than Larry, who was addressed as Duke, and who included Jill in the conversation as if she had always lived there. There was also a middle-aged couple who were not introduced at all, who ate as if they were in a restaurant, and left the table as soon as they were finished without ever having spoken to the others. But the table talk among the others was lively and irrelevant. Service was by non-android serving machines directed by controls at Miriam's end of the table. The food was excellent, and so far as Jill could tell, none of it was syntho. But it did not seem to suit Harshaw. He complained that his knife was dull, or the meat was tough, or both. He accused Miriam of serving leftovers. No one seemed to hear him, but Jill was becoming embarrassed on Miriam's account. When Anne put down her knife and fork, he mentioned his mother's cooking, and she stated bleakly, "He is beginning to think he is boss again," agreed Dorcas. "How long has it been?" "About 10 days. Too long," Anne gathered up Dorcas and Miriam with her eyes, and they all stood up. Duke went on eating. Harshaw said hastily, "Now see here, girls, not at meals. Wait until—" They paid no attention at his protest, but moved toward him. A serving machine scurried out of the way. Anne took his feet, each of the other took an arm. French doors slid out of the way, and they carried him out squawking. A few seconds later, the squawks were cut short by a splash. The three women returned at once, not noticeably mussed. Miriam sat down and turned to Jill. "More salad, Jill?" Harshaw returned a few minutes later, dressed in pajamas and robe instead of the evening jacket he had been wearing. One of the machines had covered his plate as soon as he was dragged away from the table. It now uncovered it for him, and he went on eating. "As I was saying," he remarked, "a woman who can't cook is a waste of skin. If I don't start having some service around here, I'm going to swap all of you for a dog and shoot the dog. What's the dessert, Miriam?" "Strawberry shortcake." "That's more like it. You are all reprieved until Wednesday." Jillian found that it was not necessary to understand how Jubal Harshaw's household worked. She could do as she pleased, and nobody cared. After dinner, she went into the living room with the intention of viewing a stereocast of the evening news, being anxious to find out if she herself played a part in it. But she could find no stereo receiver, nor was there anything which could have concealed a tank. Thinking about it, she could not recall having seen one anywhere in the house, nor were there any newspapers, although there were plenty of books and magazines. No one joined her. After a while, she began to wonder what time it was. She had left her watch upstairs with her purse, so she had looked around for a clock. She failed to find one, then searched her excellent memory and could not remember having seen either clock or calendar in any of the rooms she had been in. But she decided that she might as well go to bed no matter what time it was. One whole wall was filled with the books, both shelves and spindle racks. She found a spool of Kipling's Just So stories and took it happily upstairs with her. Catch my breath again. Here she found another small surprise. The bed in the room she had been given was as modern as next week, complete with auto massage, coffee dispenser, weather control, reading machine, etc. But the alarm circuit was missing, there being only a plain cover plate to show where it had been. Jill shrugged and decided that she would probably not oversleep anyway. Crawled into bed, slid the spool into the reading machine, lay back and scanned the words streaming across the ceiling. Presently, the speed control slipped out of her relaxed fingers. The lights went out, and she slept. Jubal Harshaw did not get to sleep as easily. He was vexed with himself. His initial interest in the situation had cooled, and reaction had set in. Well over half a century earlier, he had sworn a mighty oath full of fireworks never again to pick up a stray cat, and now, so help him, by the multiple paps of Venice Genetrix, he had managed to pick up 2 at once, 3 if he counted Ben Caxton. The fact that he had broken his oath more times than there were years intervening did not trouble him. This was not a small mind bothered by logic and consistency, nor did the mere presence of two more pensioners sleeping under his roof and eating at his table bother him. Pinching pennies was not in him. In the course of nearly a century of gusty living, he had been broke many times, had several times been wealthier than he now was. He regarded both conditions as he did shifts in the weather, and never counted his change. But the silly foo-foo-raw that he knew was bound to ensue when the busies caught up with these children disgruntled him in prospect. He considered it certain that catch up they would. A naive child like that Jillian infant would leave a trail behind her like a club-footed cow. Nothing else could be expected. Whereupon people would come barging into his sanctuary asking stupid questions and making stupid demands, and he, Jubal Harshaw, would have to make a decision and take action. Since he was philosophically convinced that all action was futile, the prospect irritated him. He did not expect reasonable conduct from human beings. He considered most people fit candidates for protective restraints and wet packs. He simply wished heartily that they would leave him alone. But the few he chose for playmates, he was firmly convinced that, left to himself, he would have long since archived Nirvana, divided into his own belly button and disappeared from view, like those Hindu jokers. Why couldn't they leave a man alone? Around midnight, he rarely put his 27th cigarette and sat up. The lights came on. Front, he shouted at the microphone beside his bed. Shortly, Dorcas came in, dressed in robe and slippers. She yawned widely and said, "Yes, boss." "Dorcas, for the last 20 or 30 years, I have been a worthless, useless, no-good parasite." She nodded and yawned again. "Everybody knows that." "Never mind the flattery. There comes a time in every man's life where he has to stop being sensible. A time to stand up and be counted. Strike a blow for liberty, smite the wicked. So quit yawning. The time has come." She glanced down at herself. "Maybe I'd better get dressed. Yes. Get the other girls up, too. We're going to be busy. Throw a bucket of cold water over the Duke and tell him I said to dust off the babble machine and hook it up in my study. I want the news. All of it." Dorcas looked startled and all over being sleepy. "You want Duke to hook up stereo vision?" "You heard me. Tell him I said that if it's out of order, he should pick a direction and start walking. Now get along with you. We've got a busy night ahead." "All right." Dorcas agreed doubtfully, but I think I ought to take your temperature first. Peace, woman." Duke had Jubal Harshaw's stereo receiver hooked up in time to let Jubal see a late rebroadcast of the second phony interview of the man from Mars. The commentary included the rumor about moving Smith to the Andes. Jubal put 2 and 2 together and got 22, after which he was busy calling people until morning. At dawn, Dorcas brought him his breakfast, 6 raw eggs beaten into brandy. He slurped them down while reflecting that one of the advantages of a long and busy life was that eventually a man got to know pretty near everybody of real importance and could call on them in a pinch. Harshaw had prepared a time bomb but did not propose to trigger it until the powers that be forced him to do so. He had realized at once that the government could haul Smith back into captivity on the grounds that he was incompetent to look out for himself, an opinion with which Harshaw agreed. His snap opinion was that Smith was both legally insane and medically psychopathic by all normal standards, the victim of a double-barreled situational psychosis of unique and monumental extent. First, from being raised by non-humans, and second, from having been translated suddenly into a society which was completely alien to him. Nevertheless, he regarded both the legal notion of sanity and the medical notion of psychosis as being irrelevant to this case. Here was a human animal who had made a profound and apparently successful adjustment to an alien society, but as a malleable infant could the same subject as an adult with formed habits and canalized thinking make another adjustment just as radical, and much more difficult for an adult to make than for an infant. Dr. Harshaw intended to find out. It was the first time in decades he had taken real interest in the practice of medicine. Besides that, he was tickled at the notion of balking the powers that be. He had more than his share of that streak of anarchy, which was the political birthright of every American. Pitting himself against the planetary government find him with sharper zest for living than he had felt in a generation. I love Jubal so much. I do. I really do. Around a minor G-type star, fairly far out toward one edge of a medium-sized galaxy, the planets that stars swung as usual, just as they had for billions of years, under the influence of a slightly modified inverse square law that shaped the space around them. 3 of them were big enough as planets go to be noticeable, the rest were mere pebbles, concealed in the fiery skirts of the primary or lost in the black outer reaches of space. All of them, as is always the case, were infected with the oddity of distorted entropy called life. In the case of the 3rd and 4th planets, their surface temperatures cycled around the freezing point of hydrogen monoxide. In consequence, they had developed life forms similar enough to permit a degree of social contact. On the fourth pebble out, the ancient Martians were not in any important sense disturbed by the contact with Earth. The nymphs of the race still bounced joyously around the surface of Mars, learning to live, and 8 out of 9 of them dying in the process. The adult Martians, enormously different in body and mind from the nymphs, still huddled in under the fairy, graceful cities, and were as quiet in their behavior as the nymphs were boisterous, yet were even busier than the nymphs, busy with a complex and rich life of the mind. The lives of the adults were not entirely free of work in the human sense. They still had a planet to take care of and supervise. Plants must be told when and where to grow. Nymphs who had passed their apprenticeships by surviving must be gathered in, cherished, fertilized, with the resultant eggs must be cherished and contemplated to encourage them to ripen properly. The fulfilled nymphs must be persuaded to give up childish things and then metamorphosed into adults. All of these things must be done, but they were no more the life of Mars than is walking the dog twice a day. The life of a man who controls a planet-wide corporation in the hours between those pleasant walks. Even though to a being from Arcturus III, Those daily walks might seem to be Tycoon's most significant activity, no doubt as a slave to the dog. Martians and humans were both self-aware life forms, but they had gone in vastly different directions. All human behavior, all human motivations, all man's hopes and fears were heavily colored and largely controlled by mankind's tragically and oddly beautiful pattern of reproduction. The same was true of Mars, but in mere corollary. Mars had the efficient bipolar pattern, so common in that galaxy, but the Martians had it in a form so different from the Terran form that it would have been termed sex only by a biologist, and emphatically would not have been sex to a human psychiatrist. Martian nymphs were female, all the adults were male. But in each case, in function only, not in psychology. The man-woman polarity which controlled all human lives could not exist on Mars. There was no possibility of marriage. The adults were huge, reminding the first humans to see them of ice boats under a sail. They were physically passive, mentally active. The nymphs were fat, furry spheres, full of bounce and mindless energy. There was no possible parallel between human and Martian psychological foundations. Human bipolarity was both the binding force and driving energy for all human behavior, from sonnets to nuclear equations. If any being thinks that human psychologists exaggerate on this point, let it search Terran patent offices, libraries, and art galleries for creation of eunuchs. Mars, being geared, unlike Earth, paid little attention to the envoy and the champion. The two events had happened too recently to be of significance. If Martians had used newspapers, one edition a Terran century would have been ample. Contact with other races was nothing new to Martians. It had happened before, would happen again. When the new other race had been thoroughly grokked, then, in a Terran millennium or so, would be time for action, if needed. On Mars, the currently important event was of a different sort. The discorporate Old Ones had decided almost absent-mindedly to send the nestling human to grok what he could of the third planet, then turned attention back to serious matters. Shortly before, around the time of the Terran Caesar Augustus, a Martian artist had been engaged in composing a work of art. It could have been called, with equal truth, a poem, a musical opus, or a philosophical treatise. It was a series of emotions arranged in tragic, logical necessity, since it could have been experienced by a human only in the sense in which a man, blind from birth, could have a sunset explained to him. It does not matter much to which category of human creativity it might be assigned. The important point was that the artist had accidentally discorporated before he finished his masterpiece. Let me catch my breath real quick, because I'm slipping. Unexpected discorporation was always rare on Mars. Martian taste in such matters called for life to be a rounded whole, the physical death taking place at the appropriate and selected instant. This artist, however, had become so preoccupied with his work that he had forgotten to come in out of the cold. By the time his absence was noticed, his body was hardly fit to eat. He himself had not noticed his own discorporation and had gone on composing his sequence. Martian art was divided sharply into two categories, that sort created by living adults, which was vigorous, often quite radical and primitive, and that of the old ones, which was usually conservative, extremely complex, and was expected to show much higher standards of technique. The two sorts were judged separately. By what standard should this opus be judged? It bridged from the corporate to the discorporate. Its final form had been set throughout by an old one, yet on the other hand, the artist, with the detachment of all artists everywhere, had not even noticed the change in his status and had continued to work as if he were corporate. Was it possibly a new sort of art? Could more such pieces be produced by surprise discorporation of artists while they were working? The old ones had been discussing the exciting possibilities in ruminative rapport for centuries, and all corporate Martians were eagerly awaiting their verdict. The question was of greater interest because it had not been abstract art, but religious in the Terran sense, and strongly emotional. It described the contact between the Martian race and the people of the fifth planet, an event that had happened long ago, but which was alive and important to Martians in the sense in which one death by crucifixion remained alive and important to humans, after 2 Terran millennia. The Martian race had encountered the people of the fifth planet, rocked them completely, and in due course had taken action. The asteroid ruins were all that remained, save that the Martians continued to cherish and praise the people they had destroyed. This new work of art was one of the many attempts to grok all parts of the whole beautiful experience, and all its complexity, in one opus. But before it could be judged, it was necessary to grok how to judge it. It was a very pretty problem. On the third planet, Valentine Michael Smith was not concerned with the burning issue on Mars. He had never heard of it. His Martian keeper and his keeper's water brothers had not mocked him with things he could not grasp. Smith knew of the destruction of the fifth planet and its emotional importance, just as any human schoolboy learns of Troy and Plymouth Rock. But he had not been exposed to art that he could not grok. His education had been unique, enormously greater than that of his nestlings, and enormously less than that of an adult. His keeper and his keeper's advisor among the old ones had taken a large passing interest in seeing just how much and of what sort this nestling alien could learn. The result had taught them more about the potentials of the human race than that race had yet to learn about itself. For Smith had grokked very readily things that no human being had ever learned. But just as present Smith was simply enjoying himself with a lightheartedness he had not experienced in many years, he had won a new water brother in Jubal. He had acquired many new friends. He was enjoying delightful new experiences in such kaleidoscope quantity that he had no time to grok them. He could only file them away to be relived at leisure. Oh geez, I gotta catch my breath. I gotta stop slipping up like this. His brother Jubal had assured him that he would grok this strange and beautiful place more quickly if he would learn to read. So he had taken a full day off to learn to read, really well, and quickly, with Jill pointing to words and pronouncing them for him. It had meant staying out of the swimming pool all day, which had been a great sacrifice, as swimming, once he got it through his head that it was actually permitted, was not merely an exuberant sensuous delight, but almost unbearable religious ecstasy. If Jill and Jubal had not told him to do otherwise, he would never have come out of the pool at all. Since he was not permitted to swim at night, he read all night long. He was zipping through the Encyclopedia Britannica and was sampling Jubal's medicine and law libraries as dessert. His brother Jubal had seen him leafing rapidly through one of the books, had stopped him and questioned him about what he had read. Smith had answered carefully, as it reminded him of the tests of the old ones had occasionally given him. His brother had seemed a bit upset at his answers, and Smith had found it necessary to go into an hour's contemplation on that account. For he had been quite sure that he had answered with the words written in the book, even though he did not grok them all. But he preferred the pool to the books, especially when Jill and Miriam and Larry and Anne and the rest were all splashing each other. He had not learned at once to swim as they did, but had discovered the first time that he could do five things they could not. He simply gone down to the bottom and laid there, immersed in quiet bliss, whereupon they had hauled him out with such excitement that he had almost been forced to withdraw himself, had it not been evidence that they were concerned for his welfare. Later that day, he had demonstrated the matter to Jubal, remaining at the bottom for a delicious time, and he had tried to teach it to his brother Jill. But she had become disturbed, and he had desisted. It was his first clear realization that there were things that he could do that these new friends could not. He thought about it a long time, trying to grok its fullness. Smith was happy. Harshaw was not. He continued his usual routine of aimless loafing, varied only by casual, unplanned observation of his laboratory animal, the man from Mars. He arranged no schedule for Smith, no program of study, no regular physical examinations, but simply allowed Smith to do as he pleased. Run wild like a puppy growing up on a ranch. What supervision Smith received came from Jill, more than enough in Jubal's grumpy opinions, as he took dim view of males being reared by females. However, Gillian Boardman did little more than coach Valentine Smith in the rudiments of human social behavior, and he needed very little coaching. He ate at the table with the others now, dressed himself, at least Jubal thought he did. He made a mental note to ask Jill if she still had to assist him. Oh, the HBO? It's because I have a little bit of a sponsorship from the HBO. I think it's for the next 14 days. Any new HBO subscriptions that go through that link, I'll get like $25 for. I did a little spiel on it earlier, but I'm just letting Stream Elements. I don't expect anything of it. I just figured I'd do it. Why not? I had the chance. I had the offer. I'll take it. Where was I? Smith was happy. Oh, I already read that. Where was I? I'm like a whole paragraph ahead of that. He conformed acceptably to the household's very informal customs and appeared able to cope with most new experiences on a monkey-see, monkey-do basis. Oh, we're in the red. We're in the red. The stream is crashing. Oh, we're back in the green? No? Yeah? Smith started his first meal at the table using only a spoon, and Jill had cut up his meat for him. By the end of the meal, he was attempting to eat as the others ate. At the next meal, his table manners were a precise imitation of Jill's, including superfluous... Hold up, let me... Yeah. I'm supposed to get, I think, like $25 for every new subscription to HBO Max that I get people to do. Let me see here. I didn't really look at it. I just saw that it was an offer through the Streamlabs to do the thing. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I did the talking points around 8 times already. I still gotta do a stream with the exclamation mark HBO Max and hashtag ad in the stream title. I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works. Let's see. I'm a-looking. I'm a-looking. I didn't even do all the things that it needs for it, so I don't know. I did the bare minimum so far. This is the stuff that it wants me to do. Oh, I'm signed into the right account, aren't I? Okay, okay. Hold up, I got a thing. Like I said, I don't expect anything out of it. It's just a thing to do. I'm not even really pushing it for this stream. I'm gonna figure out a stream to specifically try to push it. I want to go over some more of the stuff for it first. So yeah, it's not... Don't worry about it. Where was I? Even the twin discovery that Smith had taught himself to read with the speed of electronic scanning and appeared to have a total recall of all that he read did not tempt Jubal Harshaw to make a project of Smith, one with controls, measurements, and curves of progress. Harshaw had the arrogant humility of the man who has learned so much that he is aware of his own ignorance, and he saw no point in measurements when he did not know what he was measuring. Instead, he limited himself to notes made privately, without even any intention of publishing his observations. But, while Harshaw enjoyed watching this unique animal develop into a mimicry copy of a human being, his pleasure afforded him no happiness. Like Secretary General Douglas, Harshaw was waiting for the other shoe to drop waiting with increasing tenseness, having found himself coerced into action by the expectations of action against him on the part of the government. It annoyed and exasperated him that nothing as yet had happened. Damn it, were the Federation cops so stupid that they couldn't track an unsophisticated girl dragging an unconscious man all across the countryside? Or it seemed more likely they had been on her heels the whole way and even now were keeping a stakeout on his place. The latter thought was infuriating to Harshaw. The notion that the government might be spying on his home, his castle, with anything from binoculars to radar was as repulsive as the idea of having his mail opened. And they might be doing that. He reminded himself morosely, government, 3/4 parasitic, and the other fourth stupid fumbling. Oh, he conceded that man, a social animal, could not avoid having government, any more than an individual man could escape his lifelong bondage to his bowels. But Harshaw did not have to like it, simply because an evil was inescapable. Was no reason to term it a good. He wished that government would wander off and get lost. But it was certainly possible, or even probable, that the administration knew exactly where the man from Mars was hiding, and for reasons of their own preferred to leave it that way, while they prepared. What? If so, how long would it go on? And how long could he keep his defensive time bomb armed and ready? And where the devil was that reckless young idiot, Ben Caxton? Jill Boardman forced him out of his spiritual thumb-twiddling. Jubal, eh? Oh, it's you, Bright Eyes. Sorry, I was preoccupied. Sit down, have a drink. No, thank you, Jubal. I'm worried. Normal. Who isn't? That was a mighty pretty swan dive you did. Let's see another one just like it. Jill bit her lip and looked about 12 years old. Jubal, please listen. I'm terribly worried. He sighed. In that case, dry yourself off. The breeze is getting chilly. I'm warm enough. Jubal, would it be all right if I left Mike here? Would you take care of him? Harshaw blinked. Of course he can stay here, you know that. The girls will look out for him, and I'll keep an eye on him from time to time. He's no trouble. I take it you're leaving. She didn't meet his eye. Yes? You're welcome here, but you're welcome to leave too, if that's what you want. Jubal, I don't want to leave. Then don't. But I must. Better play that back, I didn't scan it. Don't you see, Jubal? I like it here, you've been wonderful to us, but I can't stay any longer, not with Ben missing. I've got to go look for him. Harshaw said one word, emotive, earthy, and vulgar, then added, How do you propose to look for him? She frowned. I don't know. But I can't just lie around here any longer, loafing and swimming with Ben missing. Jillian, as I pointed out to you before, Ben is a big boy now. You're not his mother, and you're not his wife. And I'm not his keeper. Neither of us is responsible for him, and you haven't any call to go looking for him, have you? Jill looked down and twisted one toe in the grass. No, she admitted. I haven't any claim on Ben. I just know that if I turned up missing, Ben would look for me until he found me. So I've got to look for him. Jubal breathed a silent malediction against all elder gods in any way involved in contriving the follies of the human race, then said aloud, all right, if you must. Let's try to get some logic into it. Do you plan to hire professionals? Say, a private detective firm that specializes in missing persons? She looked unhappy. I suppose that's the way to go about it. I've never hired a detective. Are they expensive? Quite. Jill gulped. Do you suppose they would let me arrange to pay, in monthly installments or something? Cash at the stairs is their usual way. Quit looking so grim, child. I brought that up to dispose of it. I've already hired the best in the business to try to find Ben, so there is no need for you to hawk your future to hire the second best. You didn't tell me. No need to tell you. But Jubal, what did they find out? Nothing, he said shortly. Nothing worth reporting, so there was no need to put you any further down in the dumps by telling you. Jubal scowled. When you showed up here, I thought you were unnecessarily nervy about Ben. I figure the same as is his assistant, that fellow Kilgallen, that Ben had gone yipping off on some new trail, and would check in when he had the story wrapped up. Ben does that sort of stunt, and it's his profession, he sighed. But now, I don't think so. That knothead Kilgallen, he really does have a stat print message on file. Apparently from Ben telling Kilgallen that Ben would be away a few days. My man not only saw it, but sneaked a photograph and checked. No fake, the message was sent. Jill looked puzzled. I wonder why Ben didn't send me a stat print at the same time. It isn't like him. Ben's very thoughtful. Jubal repressed a groan. Use your head, Gillian. It's because just because a package says cigarettes on the outside does not prove that the package contains cigarettes. You got here last Friday. The code groups on that stat print message showed that it was filed from Philadelphia Paoli Station Landing, Flat. To be exact, just 10:30 in the morning, before 10:34 a.m. 10:30 the morning before, 10:34 a.m. Thursday, it was transmitted a couple of minutes after it was filed and was received at once, because Ben's office has its own stat printer. Alright, now you tell me why Ben sent a printed message to his own office during working hours instead of telephoning. Why, I don't think he would ordinarily, at least I wouldn't. The telephone is the normal, but you aren't Ben. I can think of half a dozen reasons for a man in Ben's business to avoid garbles. To ensure a printed record of the files of IT&T for legal purposes. To send a delayed message, all sorts of reasons. Kilgallen saw nothing odd about it, and the simple fact that Ben, or the syndicate he sells to, goes to the expense of maintaining a private stat printer in his office shows that Ben uses it regularly. However, Jubal went on, the snoops I hired are a suspicious lot. That message placed Ben at Paoli Flat at 10:34 on Thursday, so one of them went there, Jill. That message was not sent from there, but... One moment, the message was filed from there, but did not originate there. Messages are either handed over the counter or telephoned. If one is handed over the counter, the customer can have it typed, or he can ask for a facsimile transmission of his handwriting and signature. But if it is filed by telephone, it has to be typed by the filing office before it can be photographed. Yes, of course. Doesn't that suggest anything, Jill? Jubal, I'm so worried that I'm not thinking straight. What should it suggest? With the breastfeeding, it wouldn't have suggested anything to me either. But the pro who was working for me is a very sneaky character. He arrived at Paoli with a convincing stat print made from the photograph that was taken under Kilgallen's nose, and with the business cards and credentials that made it appear that he himself was Osbert Kilgallen, the addressee. Then, with his fatherly manner and sincere face, he hornswoggled a young lady employee of IT&T into telling him things which, under the Privacy Amendment to the Constitution, she should have divulged only under court order. Very sad. Anyhow, she did remember receiving that message for file and processing. Ordinarily, she wouldn't have remembered one message out of the hundreds. They go in her ears and out her fingertips and are gone, save for the filed microprint. But luckily, this young lady is one of Ben's faithful fans. She reads his Crow's Nest column every night, a hideous vice. Jubal blinked his eyes thoughtfully at the horizon. Front? Anne appeared, dripping. Remind me, Jubal said to her, to write a popular article on the compulsive reading of the news. The theme will be that most neurosis and some psychoses can be traced to the unnecessary and unhealthy habit of daily wallowing in the troubles and sins of 5 billion strangers. The title is Gossip Unlimited. No, make that Gossip Gone Wild. Boss, you're getting morbid. Not me, but everybody else. See that I write it sometime next week. Now vanish. I'm busy. He turned back to Jillian. She noticed Ben's name, so she remembered the message, quite thrilled about it. Because it let her speak to one of her heroes, it was irked. I gather because Ben hadn't paid for the vision as well as voice. Oh, she remembers it. She remembers, too, that the service was paid for by cash from a public booth in Washington. In Washington, repeated Jill, but why would Ben call from... Of course, Jubal agreed pettishly. If he's at a public phone booth anywhere in Washington, he can have both voice and vision direct to his office. Face-to-face with his assistant, cheaper, easier, and quicker than he could have phoned a stat message to be sent back to Washington. From a point nearly 200 miles away. It doesn't make any sense, or rather, it makes just one kind of sense, hanky-panky. Ben is also used to hanky-panky, as a bride is to kisses. He didn't get to be one of the best Winchills in the business through playing his cards face up. Ben is not a Winchill. He's a Lipman. Sorry, I'm colorblind in that range. Keep quiet. He might have believed that his phone was tapped, but his stat printer was not, or he might have suspected that both were tapped, and I've no doubt they are by now. If not, then... And that he could use this roundabout delay to convince whoever was tapping him that he really was away from Washington. I would not be back for several days. Jubal frowned. In the latter case, we would be doing him no favor by finding him. We might be endangering his life. Jubal, no. Jubal, yes, he answered wearily. That boy skates close to the edge. He always has. He's utterly fearless, and that's how he's made his reputation, but the rabbit is never more than 2 jumps ahead of the coyote, and this time maybe 1 jump. Or none. Jill, Ben has never tackled a more dangerous assignment than this. If he has disappeared voluntarily, and he may have, Do you want to risk stirring things up by bumbling around in your amateur way, calling attention to the fact that he has dropped out of sight? Kilgallen still has him covered, as Ben's column has appeared every day. I don't ordinarily read it, but I've made it my business to know this time. Canned columns, Mr. Callan told me so. Of course. Some of Ben's perennial series on corrupt campaign funds, that's the subject. As safe as being in favor of Christmas. Maybe they're kept on file for such emergencies, or perhaps Kilgallen is writing them. In any case, Ben Caxton, the ever-ready advocate of the people, is still officially on his usual soapbox. Perhaps he planned in that way, my dear, because he found himself in such danger that he did not dare get in touch even with you. Well? Catch my breath again. My breath. Ooh. Let's see. Yeah, I just gotta give it a second. I don't want to push it too fast. Starting to trip up again. Why does VTuber Plus keep saying it's ready? Has it been crashing on me? What is this bullshit? What are you doing? Fix yourself. I don't like that. There we are. That's a bit better. Oh, sorry, I got caught up in the nocturnes again. I keep doing that. There's a reason this is my favorite classical music. It's so good. I'm assuming Vesa fell asleep, which I do hope Vesa fell asleep. Vesa needs to sleep. Dr. Acid throwing a knife at my face. How rude. I've been knifed. Let's get back to the book. Jillian glanced fearfully around, her at a scene almost unbearably peaceful, bucolic, and beautiful, then covered her face with her hands. Jubal, I don't know what to do. Snap out of it, he said gruffly. Don't bawl over Ben, not in my presence. The worst that can possibly have happened to him is death, and that we are all in for. If not this morning, then in days or weeks or years at most. Talk to your protege Mike about it. He regards this corporation as less to be feared than a scolding, and he may be right. Why, if I told Mike that we were going to roast him and serve him for dinner tonight, he would thank me for the honor with his voice choked with gratitude. I know he would, Jill agreed in a small voice, but I don't have his philosophical attitude about such things. Nor do I, Harshaw agreed cheerfully. But I am beginning to grasp it, and I must say that it is a consoling one to a man of any age. A capacity for enjoying the inevitable. Why, I've been cultivating that all my life, but this infant from Mars, barely old enough to vote and too unsophisticated to stand clear of the horse cars, has me convinced that I have just reached the kindergarten class in this all-important subject. Jill, you asked if Mike was welcome to stay on. Child, he is the most welcome guest I've ever had. I want to keep that boy around till I found out what it is that he knows and I don't. This corporation thing in particular, it's not the Freudian death wish cliche. I'm sure of that. It has nothing to do with life being unbearable. None of that. Even the weariest river stuff, it's more like Stevenson's glad did I live and gladly die, and I lay me down with a will. Only I've always suspected that Stevenson was either whistling in the dark or more likely enjoying the compensating euphoria of consumption. But Mike has me halfway convinced that he really knows what he is talking about. I don't know, Jill answered dully. I'm just worried about Ben. So am I, agreed Jubal. So let's discuss Mike another time. Jill, I don't think that Ben is simply hiding any more than you do. But you said, sorry, I didn't finish. My hired men didn't limit themselves to Ben's office in Paoli Flat on Thursday morning. Ben called at Bethesda Medical Center in company with lawyers he uses and a fair witness, the famous James Oliver Cavendish. In case you follow such things, I don't, I'm afraid. No matter. The fact that Ben retained Cavendish shows how seriously he took the matter. You don't hunt rabbits with an elephant gun. The three were taken to see the man from Mars. Jillian gaped, then said explosively, that's impossible. They couldn't have come on that floor without my knowing it. Take it easy, Jill. You're disputing a report by a fair witness, and not just any fair witness, Cavendish himself. If he says it, it's gospel. I don't care if he's the 12 apostles. He was not on my floor last Thursday morning. You didn't listen closely. I didn't say that they were taken to see our friend Mike. I said they were taken to see the man from Mars. The phony one, obviously that actor fellow they stereovised. Oh, of course, and Ben caught them out. Jubal looked pained. Little girl, count to 10,000 by twos while I finish this. Ben did not catch them out. In fact, even the Honorable Mr. Cavendish did not catch them out. At least he won't say so. You know how fair witnesses behave. Well, no, I don't. I've never had any dealings with a fair witness, so perhaps you aren't aware of it. Anne? Anne was seated on the springboard. She turned her head. Jubal called out, that new house on the far hilltop. Can you see what color they've painted it? Anne looked in the direction in which Jubal was pointing and answered, it's white on this side. She did not inquire why Jubal had asked, nor make any comment. Jubal went on to Jill in normal tones. You see, Anne is so thoroughly indoctrinated that it doesn't even occur to her to infer that the other side is probably white too. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't force her to commit herself to the far side, unless she herself went around to the other side and looked at it. And even then she wouldn't assume that it stayed whatever color it might be after she left, because they might repaint it as soon as she turned her back. Anne is a fair witness, graduate, unlimited license, and admitted to testify before the High Court. Sometime ask her why she decided to give up public practice, but don't plan on anything else that day. The wench will recite the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that takes time. Back to Mr. Cavendish. Ben retained him for open witnessing, full disclosure, without enjoying him to privacy. So when Cavendish was questioned, he answered in full and boring detail. I've got a tape of it upstairs, but the interesting part of his report is that he never states that the man they were taken to see was not the man from Mars. But not one word can be construed as indicating that Cavendish accepted the exhibit he was called to view as being, in fact, the man from Mars. If you knew Cavendish, and I do, this would be conclusive. If Cavendish had seen Mike, even for a few minutes, he would have reported that he had seen him with such exactness that you and I, who know Mike, would know that he had seen him. For example, Cavendish reports in precise professional jargon the shape of his exhibit's ears, and it does not match Mike's ear shape at all. QED, he did not see Mike, nor did Ben. They were shown a phony. Furthermore, Cavendish knows it, even though he is professionally restrained from giving opinions or conclusions. But I told you so, they never came near my floor. Yes, but it tells us something more. This occurred hours before you pulled your jailbreak for Mike, about 8 hours earlier, as Cavendish sets their arrival in the presence of the phony man from Mars at 9:14 Thursday morning. That is to say, the government still had Mike under their thumb at that moment. In the same building, they could have exhibited him, yet they took the really grave risk of offering a phony for inspection by the most noted fair witness in Washington in the country. Why? He waited, Jill answered slowly. You're asking me? I don't know. Ben told me that he intended to ask Mike if he wanted to leave the hospital and help him do so if he said yes, which Ben did try with the phony, so? Out, Jubal. They couldn't have known that Ben intended to do that, and anyhow, Mike wouldn't have left with Ben. Why not? Later that day he left with you, yes, but I was already his water brother, just as you are now. He has this crazy Martian idea that he can trust utterly anyone with whom he has shared a drink of water. With a water brother, he is completely docile, and with anybody else he is stubborn as a mule. Ben couldn't have budged him, she added. At least, that is the way he was last week. He's changing awfully fast. So he is. Too fast, maybe. I've never seen muscle tissue develop so rapidly. I'm sorry I didn't weigh him the day you arrived. Never mind. Back to Ben Cavendish's reports that Leon dropped him with Anne the lawyer, a chap named Frisbee, at 9:31. And Ben kept the cab. We don't know where Ben went then, but an hour later he, or let's say somebody who said he was Ben, phoned that message to Paoli Flat. You don't think it was Ben? I do not. Cavendish reported the license number of the cab. The hub. Great timing. Cavendish reported the license number of that cab, and scouts tried to get a look at the daily trip tape for that cab. If Ben used his credit card rather than feeding coins to the cab's meter, his charge number should have been... Oh, you just knocked me the fuck out! Oh, shit! Oh, that hit me in the tit. Oh, God. Ow. Fuck. Well, damn. Jeez. Great timing. Fantastic timing. Oh. Oh, Lord. If Ben used his credit card rather than feeding coins into the cab's meter, his charge number should be printed on the tape, but even if he paid cash, the tape should know where the cab has been and when. Well? Harshaw shrugged. Get hecked. I know, I got hecked. The records show that the cab was in for repairs and was never in use. Thursday morning, that gives us two choices. Either a fair witness misread or misremembered a cab serial number, or somebody tampered with the record. He added grimly, maybe a jury would decide that even a fair witness could glance at a cab serial number and misread it, especially if he had not been asked to remember it. But I don't believe it, not when the witness is James Oliver Cavendish. Cavendish would either be certain of that serial number, or his report would never mention it. Harshaw scowled and went on, Jill, you're forcing me to rub my own nose in it, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Granted that Ben could have sent that message, it is most unlikely that he could have tampered with the daily record of that cab, and still less believable that he had any reason to. No, let's face it, Ben went somewhere in that cab, and somebody who could get at that records of a public carrier went to a lot of trouble to conceal where he went and sent a phony message to keep anyone from realizing that he had disappeared. Disappeared? Kidnapped, you mean? Softly, Jill. Kidnapped is a dirty word. It's the only word for it, Jubal. How can you sit there and do nothing when you ought to be shouting it from the stop it, Jill? There is another word. Instead of kidnapped, he might be dead. Jillian slumped. Yes, she agreed dully, and that's what I'm really afraid of. So am I, but we'll assume he is not. Until we have seen his bones, but it's one or the other, so we assume that he is kidnapped. Jill, what is the greatest danger about kidnapping? No, don't bother your pretty head. I'll tell you. The greatest danger to the victim is a hue and cry, because if a kidnapper is frightened, he will almost always kill his victim. Had you thought of that? Jillian looked woefully and did not answer. Harshaw went on gently. I am forced to say that I think it is extremely likely that Ben is dead. He has been gone too long, but we've agreed to assume that he is alive until we know otherwise. Now you intend to look for him. Jillian, can you tell me how you will go about this, without increasing the risk that Leon will be done away with by the unknown party or parties who kidnapped him? But we know who they are, do we? Of course we do. The same people who were keeping Mike prisoner. The government. Harshaw shook his head. We don't know it. That's an assumption based on what Ben was doing when last seen. But it's not a certainty. Ben has made lots of enemies with his column, and by no means all of them are in the government. I can think of several who would willingly kill him if they could get away with it. However, Harshaw frowned, your assumption is all we have to go on. But not the government. That's too sweeping a term. The government is several million people, nearly 1 million in Washington alone. We have to ask ourselves whose toes are being stepped on, what person, or persons, not the government, but what individuals. Why, that's plain enough, Jubal. I told you, just as Ben told me. It's the Secretary General himself. No, Harshaw denied. Well, that may be true. It's not useful to us, no matter who did what. If it is anything rough or illegal, it won't be the Secretary General who did it. Even if he benefits by it, nobody would ever be able to prove that he even knew about it. It is likely that he would not know about it. Not the rough stuff. No, Jill. We need to find out which lieutenant in the Secretary General's large staff of stooges handled this operation. But that isn't as hopeless as it sounds. I think when Ben was taken in to see the phony man from Mars, one of Mr. Douglas's executive assistants was with him, tried to talk him out of it, then went with him. It now appears that the same top-level stooge also dropped out of sight last Thursday. I don't think it is a coincidence, but when he appears to have been in charge of the phony man from Mars, if we find him, we may find Ben. Gilbert Berquist is his name, and I have reason— Berquist? That's the name, and I have reason to suspect, Jill. What's the trouble? Stop it. Don't faint or sweep on me. I'll dunk you in the pool. Jubal, this Berquist, is there more than one Berquist, eh? I suppose so. Though from all I can find out, he does seem to be a bit of a bastard. There might be only one. I mean the one on the executive staff. Why, do you know him? I don't know, but if it is the same one, I don't think there's any use looking for him. Talk, girl. Jubal, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry, but I didn't tell you quite everything. Here it is. Here's where Jubal finds out about Mike's powers. Stumbling, stuttering, and stammering, Jillian managed to tell about the two men who suddenly were not there. Jubal simply listened, and that's all she concluded sadly. I screamed and scared Mike, and he went into that trance you saw him in, and then I had a simply terrible time getting here. But I told you about that. Yes, you did. I wish that you had told me about this, too. She turned red. I didn't think anybody would believe me, and I was scared, Jubal. Can they do anything to us, eh? Jubal seemed surprised. Do what? Send us to jail or something? Oh, my dear. It has not yet been declared a crime to be present at a miracle, nor to work one. But this matter has more aspects than a cat has hair. Keep quiet and let me think. Jill kept quiet. Jubal held still about 10 minutes. At last he opened his eyes and said, I don't see your problem, child. He's probably lying on the bottom of the pool again. He is? So dive in and get him, dry him off, and bring him to my study. I want to find out if he can repeat this stunt at will. And I don't think we need an audience. No, we don't. We do need an audience. Tell Anne to put on her witness robe and come along. Tell her I want her in her official capacity. I want Duke too. Yes, boss. You're not privileged to call me boss. You're not tax deductible. Yes, Jubal. That's better. I wish we had somebody here who never would be missed. Regrettably, we are all friends. Do you suppose Mike can do the stunt with inanimate objects? I don't know. We'll find out. Well, what are you standing here for? Haul that boy out of the water and wake him up. Jubal blinked thoughtfully. What a way to dispose of. No, I mustn't be tempted. See you upstairs, girl. And here's where it starts to get a little bit more serious. Just a little bit. A few minutes later, Jill reported Jubal's study. Anne was there, seated and enveloped in the long white robes of her guild. She glanced at Jill, said nothing. Jill found a chair and kept quiet. As Jubal was at his desk and dictating to Dorcas, he did not appear to notice Jill's arrival, and went on dictating. From under the sprawled body, soaking in one corner of the rug and seeping out beyond it in a spreading dark red pool on the tiled hearth, where it was attracting the attention of two unemployed flies. Miss Simpson clutched at her mouth. Dear me, she said in distressed small voice. Daddy's favorite rug. And Daddy, too. I do believe. End of chapter. Dorcas, and end of the first installment. Mail it off. Get... Dorcas stood up and left, taking along her shorthand machine and nodding and smiling at Jill as she did so. Jubal said, Where's Mike? In his room, answered Jillian. Dressing. He'll be along soon. Dressing, Jubal repeated peevishly. I didn't say the party was formal. But he has to get dressed. Why? It makes never mind to me whether you kids wear skin or fleece-lined overcoats, and it's a warm day. Chase him in here. Please, Jubal, he's got to learn how to behave. I'm trying so hard to train him. You're trying so hard to force your own narrow-minded, middle-class, Bible-Belt morality. Don't think I haven't been watching. I have not. I have concerned myself with his morals. I've simply been teaching him necessary customs. Customs, morals, is there a difference? Women, do you realize what you're doing here? By the grace of gods and an inside straight, we have a personality untouched by the psychotic taboos of our tribe. And you want to turn him into a carbon copy of every fourth-rate conformist in this frightened land? Why don't you go whole hog? Get him a briefcase and make him carry it wherever he goes. Make him feel the shame if he doesn't have it. I'm not doing anything of the sort. I'm just trying to keep him out of trouble. It's for his own good. Jubal snorted. That's the excuse they gave the tomcat just before his operation. Oh, Jill stopped and appeared to be counting 10. Then she said formally and bleatedly, This is your house, Dr. Harshaw. We are in your debt. If you'll excuse me, I will fetch Michael at once. She got up to leave. Hold it, Jill. Sir, sit back down, and for God's sake, quit trying to be as nasty as I am. You don't have my years of practice. Now let me get something straight. You are not in my debt. You can't be impossible because I never do anything I don't want to do, nor does anyone, but in my case I am always aware of it, so please don't invent a debt that does not exist. Or before you know it, you will be trying to feel gratitude, and that is the treacherous first step downward to complete moral degradation. You grok that, or don't you? There it is. There's my line. That's what I was waiting for. Let me read that again because it is just too perfect. Because we could all try to live by this. We really could. Sit back down and for God's sake, quit trying to be as nasty as I am. You don't have my years of practice. Now let me get something straight. You are not in my debt. You can't be. Impossible, because I never do anything I don't want to do, nor does anyone. But in my case, I am always aware of it. So please, don't invent a debt that does not exist, or before you know it, you will be trying to feel gratitude. And that is the treacherous first step downward to complete moral degradation. You grok that, or don't you? I fucking love Jubal. I love Jubal so much. Oh, as a character, Jubal is... We can all strive to be half as fucking wise as Jubal. Half as philosophically rounded as Jubal. Like, god damn. Jubal is something to strive for. Jill bit her lip and grinned. I'm not sure I know what grok means, nor do I, but I intend to go on taking lessons from Mike until I do. But I was speaking dead seriously. Gratitude is a euphemism for resentment. Resentment for most people I do not mind, but from pretty little girls it is distasteful to me. Why, Jubal, I don't resent you. That's silly. I hope you don't, but you certainly will if you don't root out of your mind this delusion that you are indebted to me. The Japanese have 5 different ways to say thank you, and every one of them translates literally as resentment in various degrees. Would that English have the same built-in honesty on this point? Instead, English is capable of defining sentiments that the human nervous system is quite incapable of experiencing. Gratitude, for example. Get splashed. Get gooed. Get splashed. How beautiful. Jubal, you're a cynical old man. I do feel grateful to you, and I shall go on feeling grateful. And you are a sentimental young girl that makes us a perfect complementary pair, Let's run over to Atlantic City for a weekend of illicit debauchery, just us two. Why, Jubal, you see how deep your gratitude goes when I attempt to draw on it? Oh, I'm ready. How soon do we leave? We should have left 40 years ago. Shut up. The second point I want to make is that you are right. The boy does indeed have to learn human customs. He must be taught to take off his shoes in a mosque, and to wear his hat in a synagogue, and to cover his nakedness when taboo requires it. Or our tribal shamans will burn him for deviationism. But child, by the myriad of deceptive aspects, don't brainwash him in the process. Make sure he is cynical about each part of it. I'm not sure how to go about that, Jubal. Well, Mike just doesn't seem to have any cynicism in him. So, yes, we'll take a band in it. What's keeping him? Shouldn't he be dressed by now? I'll go see. In a moment, Jill. I explained to you why I had not been anxious to accuse anyone of kidnapping Ben, and the reports I have had since serve to support the probability that he was a tactically correct decision. If Ben is being unlawfully detained, to put it at its sweetest, at least we have not crowded the opposition to getting rid of the evidence by getting rid of Ben. If he is alive, he stands a chance of staying alive, but I took other steps. The first night you were here, do you know your Bible? Not very well. It merits study. It contains a very practical advice for most emergencies. Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light. John something or other. Jesus speaking to Nicodemus. I have been expecting at any moment an attempt to get Mike away from us, for it did not seem likely that he would manage to cover your tracks perfectly, and if they do try, well, this is a lonely place and we haven't any heavy artillery. But there is one weapon that might balk them. Light. The glaring spotlight of publicity. So I made some phone calls and arranged for any ruckus here to have publicity. Not just a little publicity that the administration might be able to hush up, but great gobs of publicity, worldwide and all at once. The details do not matter where and how the cameras are mounted, and what line of sight linkages have been rigged, but if a fight breaks out here, it will be picked up by 3 networks, and at the same time a number of hold for release messages will be delivered to a wide spread of VIPs, all of whom would like very much to catch our Honorable Secretary General with his pants down. Harshaw frowned. The weakness in this defense is that I can't maintain it indefinitely. Truthfully, when I set it up, my worries was to set it up fast enough. I expected whatever popped to pop inside of 24 hours. Now I'm worried. My worry is reversed, and I think we're going to have to force some action quickly while I can still keep a spotlight on us. What sort of action, Jubal? I don't know. I've been fretting about it the past 3 days to the point where I can't enjoy my food. But you gave me a glint full of a new approach when you told me that remarkable story about what happened when they tried to grab you two in Ben's apartment. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Jubal, but I didn't think anybody would believe me, and I must say it makes me feel good that you do believe me. I didn't say I believed you. What? But you... I think you were telling the truth, but a dream is a true experience of a sort, and so is a hypnotic delusion. But what happens in this room during the next half hour will be seen by a fair witness and by cameras, which are, he leaned and pressed a button, rolling right now. I don't think Anne can be hypnotized. What? Wow. Where are we at here? Doo-doo, doo-doo. I don't think Anne can be hypnotized when she's on duty, and I'll lay long odds that cameras can't be. We should be able to find out what kind of truth we're dealing with, after which we should be able to decide how to go about forcing the powers that be to drop the other shoe, and maybe figure a way that will help Ben at the same time. Go get Mike. Mike's delay was not mysterious, merely worrisome to him. He had managed to tie his left shoestring to his right hand, then he had stood up, tripped himself, fallen flat, and in doing so, jerked the knots almost hopelessly tight. He had spent the rest of the time analyzing his predicament, concluding correctly why he had failed, and slowly getting the snarl untied and the strings correctly tied. One bow to each shoe unlinked. He had not been aware that his dressing had taken long. He had simply been troubled that he had failed to repeat correctly something which Jill had already taught him. He confessed his failures abjectly to her, even though he had repaired it by the time she came to fetch him. She soothed and reassured him, combed his hair, and herded him in to see Jubal. Harshaw looked up. "Hi, son, sit down." "Hi, Jubal." Valentine Michael Smith answered gravely, sat down, waited. Jill had to rid herself of the impression that Smith had bowed deeply. Then, in fact, he had not even nodded. Harshaw put aside a hush mic, and said, "Well, boy, what have you learned today?" Let's see, we're going to do just a few more pages tonight. Interesting. Yeah, we're going to do just a few more pages tonight to get past this bit, and we'll pick up. Smith smiled happily, then answered as always with a slight pause. "I have today learned to do a 1.5 gainer, that is jumping a dive for entering our water by... I know I saw you doing it, but you splashed. Keep your toes pointed, your knees straight, and your feet together." Smith looked unhappy. "I rightly did not... It did? Did not it do?" "You did it very rightly for a first time. Watch how Dorcas does it. Hardly a ripple in the water." Smith considered this slowly. "The water grokks Dorcas. It cherishes him." "Her. Dorcas is a her, not a him. Her," Smith corrected. "Then my speaking was false?" "I have read in Webster's New International Dictionary of the English Language, 3rd edition, published in Springfield, Massachusetts, that the masculine gender includes the feminine gender in speaking. In Hagworth's Law of Contracts, 5th edition, Chicago, Illinois, 1978, on page 1012, it says, "Hold it," Harshaw said hastily. "The trouble is with the English language, not with you. Masculine speech forms do include the feminine when you're speaking in general, but not when you are talking about a particular person. Dorcas is always she or her, never he or him. Remember it." "I will remember it." "You had better remember it, or you may provoke Dorcas into proving just how female she is." Harshaw blinked thoughtfully. "Jill, is the lad sleeping with you or with one of you?" She barely hesitated and answered flatly, "So far as I know, Mike doesn't sleep." "You evaded my question. Then perhaps you had better assume that I intended to evade it. However, he is not sleeping with me." Damn it. My interest is scientific. However, we'll pursue another line of inquiry. Mike, what else have you learned today?" "I have learned 2 ways to tie my shoes. One way is only good for lying down. The other way is good for walking. And I have learned conjugations. I am, thou art, he is, we are, you are, they are, I was, thou was." "Okay, that's enough. What else?" Mike smiled delightedly. "To yesterday I'm learning to drive the tractor brightly, and with beauty." "Eh?" Jubal turned to Jill. "When did this happen? Yesterday afternoon, while you were napping?" "Jubal, it's all right. Duke was very careful not to let him get hurt." Well, obviously he did not get hurt. Mike, have you been reading?" "Yes, Jubal." "What?" "I have read." Mike recited carefully 3 more volumes of the encyclopedia. Mary to Mush, to Musher, to Ozon, P to Planty. You have told me not to read too much of the encyclopedia at one reading, so then I stopped. I then read The Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet by Master William Shakespeare of London. I then read the Memoirs of Joaquin Casanova de Jean Guy, as translated into English by Arthur Machen, and then read The Art of Examination by Francis Wheelman. I then tried to grok what I had read until Joel told me I must come to breakfast. "And did you grok it?" Smith looked troubled. "Jubal, I do not know." "Is there anything bothering you, Mike? I do not grok all fullness of what I read. And the history written by Master William Shakespeare, I found myself full of happiness at the death of Romeo. Then I read on and learned that he had discorporated too soon, or so that I thought I had grokked. Why? He was a blithering young idiot." "Beg pardon? I don't know, Mike." Smith considers this, then he muttered something in Martian and added, "I am only an egg." "Eh? Usually say that when you want to ask a favor, Mike. What is it this time? Speak up." Smith hesitated, then he blurted out, "Jubal, my brother, Would please you ask Romeo why he discorporated? I cannot ask him, I am only an egg, but you can, and then you can teach me the grokking of it. For the next several minutes, the conversation became very tangled. Jubal saw at once that Mike believed that Romeo of Montague had been a living, breathing person, and Jubal managed with no special shock to his own concepts to realize that Mike expected him to be able to somehow conjure up Romeo's ghost and demand of him explanations for his conduct when in the flesh. But to get over to Mike the idea that none of the Capulets and Montagues had ever had any sort of corporate existence was another matter. The concept of fiction was nowhere in Mike's experience. There was nothing on which it could rest. And Jubal's attempts to explain the idea were so emotionally upsetting to Mike that Jill was afraid he was about to roll up into a ball and withdraw himself. But Mike himself saw how perilously close he was to coming to that necessity, and he had already learned that he must not resort to this refuge in the presence of his friends, because with the exception of his brother, Dr. Nelson, it always caused him emotional disturbances. So he made a mighty effort, slowed down his heart, calmed his emotions, and smiled. I will wait till the grokking comes of itself. That's better, agreed Jubal, but hereafter, before you read anything, ask me or ask Jill, somebody, whether or not it is fiction. I don't want you to get mixed up. I will ask Jubal. Mike decided that, when he did grok the strange idea that he must report the fullness to the old ones, and suddenly found himself wondering if the old ones knew about fiction. The completely incredible idea that there might be something which was as strange to the old ones as it was to himself was so much more revolutionary, indeed heretically so, than the sufficiently weird concept of fiction that he hastily put it aside to cool, saved it for future deep